Hi, it's Sally Wagner. Welcome to High Frequency Mindset Podcast. And I'm very pleased to introduce our guest today, Mr. J. Welcome.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that you're making time to be with us. I'm going to read your bio and then we'll talk. How about that?
Sounds like a plan.
Fabulous. Mr. J is a betrayal trauma practitioner and intrapersonal relationship coach. He holds a master's degree in education, is ministry-credentialed, a certified special education teacher, and author of a children's book, I Am Loved Right Where I Am, a veteran of the United States military, an inspirational public speaker, adoptive parent, and much more. But his childhood was anything but success. After years of drugs, alcohol, and years in special ed, Mr. J quit school in 6th grade, ultimately living on the streets, falling victim to abuse after abuse. After the second gun to his temple, Mr. J vowed to fix himself so he could help fix others. Determined, Mr. J put himself through school researching self-help books, therapy, psychology, and spirituality. Mr. J learned and stands by his motto, the relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for all other relationships around you. And says relationships can break you, but even broken crayons can create beautiful masterpieces. I absolutely love that story and the quotes. Thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, the relationship we have with ourselves sets the tone and standard for relationships around us, because I tell people all the time, the people that break our boundaries the most is ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't know where you want to take this conversation, but if you don't mind, I want to tell you something quickly. I was just on a coaching call not too long ago, and this lady, she's in the dating pool, and she said, why did this guy at the end of the night, it wasn't like a rape situation, but he forced himself to kiss her constantly. And so, but during the conversation, I found out that when she talks to guys to bring them to dinner, she often meets them at the restaurant. She has a rule, a boundary, that no guys are ever to pick her up at her house. They have to meet her at the restaurant. Well, come to find out, she said, well, this guy was traveling so far and I just felt so bad. I just said, you know what, you can meet me at my house and take me out. And I said, okay, well, you blurred your own boundary.
Yeah.
And we teach people how to treat us.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to respect your own boundary, you can't expect others to respect your boundaries.
Yeah. I think, and I love that. I say that a lot. We do teach people how to treat us. And most importantly, we teach ourselves how to treat ourselves.
Absolutely.
Because you're right. It starts with how we treat ourselves. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's a real life example of how it works, right?
Absolutely. And so, and then it starts the vicious cycle of, why didn't I, self-blame, self-criticism, that negative self-dialogue. Why didn't I stick to my boundaries? Why am I this weak? Yeah. Why this,
yeah.
It goes on to that long story.
Yeah. And then you're right. We get into that vicious cycle of blaming ourselves, feeling guilty, feeling shame, feeling all of those things that just drag us down even more into that swamp of low energy, low frequency emotion.
Yeah. I'll tell you something. I understand that holding to boundaries sometimes is a little uncomfortable. I get that. But, you have to be uncomfortable sometimes to be comfortable. Yeah. I'm sure she would have much rather, now looking back, made the uncomfortable decision to say, no, we're still going to make, because now she was dealt with the uncomfortable position that she was in. Not to say that it was her fault by any means, what happened whatsoever, but she did teach somebody, hey, listen, my boundaries are negotiable.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess this is a question and a statement. The statement is, and then I would like your response to it. I think that all stems from our feelings of worthiness or lack of worthiness. And I think ultimately when we blur those boundaries, it's because of that.
Absolutely. And this is why I always say the best gift you can give yourself and everybody around you is to continually get to know who you are, because we're ever changing people. I mean, I often say we're not human beings, we're human evolvements. You're not the same person today that you were 5 years ago. You're not going to be the same person 5 years from now than you are today. It
Right.
would be nice if you got to know who you were so you could offer that gift to other people. I'm a wedding officiant, and so many times I'm in front of two young couples that are exchanging I do's, and they have no clue who the I am is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's really a gift to give yourself and others to get to know who you are. In this day in social media, everybody's so caught up in trying to impress the Joneses, they don't spend time getting to know who they are.
Yeah. And I think, society certainly it feeds that facade. You want to have that successful facade, whatever that means, right? Be a certain way, look a certain way, wear certain clothes, etc. And yet we don't address what really is happening on the inside.
Yeah, you got to ask yourself, what's important? Do I have, external validation? Is that my success? Or knowing who I am, is that more successful?
Yeah. Yeah, as you were saying those things, I had a quote from Dr. Seuss. I'm not going to say it correctly, but the gist is, there's no one alive who is youer than you.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, right? To figure out who you are and then be you, right?
Yeah, I mean, what is there? 7 billion people on the face of the earth. There's only one you.
Yeah.
And I tell, when I go around to like schools, I end some of my speeches, depending on where I am and what grade, I say, guys, and it's very true. I believe every word of this. You are a gift. Everybody is a gift. The day you come into this world is a present. You just have to unwrap that gift and show the world who you are, because everybody has gifts to give. Find out who you are, discover who you are, and give the world that gift. So we're all, everybody's taken. You got to be your own self.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet I think the tragedy is that so many people try to be somebody else. They see somebody else who's successful or who is doing something that they want, and so they try to copy. And it's just a copy. It's not the original, right?
And 9 times out of 10, the person that they're copying copied somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So what are some techniques that you could share to help people discover that, or at least begin that self-discovery?
There's so many things, from even from a standard perspective. Getting to know your love language. There's the 5 love languages.
Right.
There's physical touch, and there's acts of service, and there's, kindness and whatever. And if people don't know their love language, it's an easy Google search. Get to know your attachment style. Do you have a secure attachment? Are you anxious? Are you avoidant? Are you fearful? Because this is how you're going to see the world.
Yeah.
I mean, Sally, even people that are left-handed versus right-handed, they view the world differently.
Mm-hmm.
Where on the hierarchy are you from your siblings? Are you a middle child, an older child, a younger child? Because you're going to have a different worldview from that perspective. So, what are your likes? What are your likes? Not because they were your parents' likes. What are your likes? Do you line more with the rationales of the Republican Party or the Democrat Party? Not because your parents did. What makes sense to you and your system? Now, this doesn't mean that you absolutely don't have to be negative to anybody around you, disrespectful to anybody around you, aggressive to anyone. Because if anything, we should be loving and kind and absolutely giving and forgiving and generous, but still stand true to who we are. But we can't do that unless we know who we are.
Exactly.
So, do you like long walks on the beach, or does sand turn you off?
Yeah.
And obviously, when we get into relationships, there is a lot of negotiation and compromise, there's no doubt, but there's a dance. You got to hold on to yourself while you're holding a space for your partner, and your partner has to hold on to who they are while they're holding a space for you. It's a dance of compromise and negotiation, but you never lose yourself in the process, because God forbid anything happen with that person, you're lost.
Yeah, yeah. And that is truly what happens to a lot of people. You know, they lose a partner through death or divorce or separation or what, you know, whatever life
Yeah,
brings. They lose a job, they lose whatever, and suddenly they don't know who they are anymore because they didn't know who they were before.
absolutely, absolutely. And um, the person you're with can be anything, but they can't be your everything.
Yeah,
You know, they can be your number one, but they can't be your only one.
yeah, yeah. That's so true. And I think again, that's a tragedy for a lot of people that they invest everything in that one person, that one job, that one role in life, you know. And we're so much more than that.
Yeah. I
That's
tell people all the time, you know, listen, I equate us all to like little birds. It's wonderful when we get married, when we're in a long time relationship, when we like someone, they should be our sturdy branch. We should land on them and feel safe and feel comfortable and feel supportive and feel like they got us and they know us. But don't ever give up the power of your wings, because if that
right.
branch gives out, you got to keep yourself afloat.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and that really it involves a lot of questioning. And you hit on a couple of these, you know, why is something important to us? Is it because somebody told us? You know, do I like this because my family liked it, or is it because it's important to me? And those are such important questions. You know, I recall, I won't belabor it, but a conversation with somebody, and she was considering a new car. And she was like, no, I'm not sure I really want a new car. You know, I like my car. I don't really look forward to new payments. And she was sharing that story with a colleague, and the person was like, of course you want that new BMW because you're worth it. And the person I was talking to said, I know I'm worth it, but I just don't want it, you know? So it's like, it was more important to the other person than it was to her. And so those are the kinds of questions we should ask ourselves. Why am I doing this? Is it really my opinion? Is it really because it's me? Or is it something that I got told
Yeah,
from somebody
which
else?
is why it's so important to stand firm in who we are,
Yeah,
because so many people, unfortunately, they're like a leaf in the ocean. The wind blows east, the
yeah,
leaf turns. The wind blows west, and you know they go west. You
right.
know, especially in this day and age, Sally, where we are pulled very thin in every direction. I
Yeah,
mean, I get up in the morning and my boss wants more out of me. When I
yeah,
come home at night, my spouse wants more out of me.
yeah,
Before I go to every second of the day, my kids want
yeah,
more out of me. On
yeah,
Sunday, my pastor wants more out of me. So it's like I am stretched so thin. If you volunteer, they want more out of you. It's very easy to get lost in
it
who you
is.
are. So
Yes.
this is why I say in every area, self-care is not vanity, it's sanity. You gotta take some time out for yourself, even if that means once in a while at the expense of something else. There's times, I mean, I am a very devoted family man, but there's times where I tell my kids, Papa's gonna go spend 10 minutes in my room. I don't care if it's I gotta
Yeah,
meditate,
yeah,
pray,
yeah,
journal,
yeah,
watch something funny. I just need me time, because I always say, you know, whatever, everything in your cup is yours. Whatever
mhm,
is overflowing out of your cup is for everyone else. You can't pour from an empty cup.
yeah,
So you're not doing anybody a service if you don't fill your cup. The Titanic didn't save anybody when it got filled with
right.
water.
Yeah,
So we can be as
yeah,
strong and sturdy as the Titanic, but if we let all this trauma and drama from the outside get into us like the Titanic did, we're going to flounder.
yeah. And you make an excellent point. You know, the overflow belongs to others. So we want to be careful what we fill it with, because that's going to determine what overflows, right?
100%, which is why I say we teach people all the time how to treat us, you know, and the
Yeah.
relationship we have with ourselves sets the tone and standard, you know, for all
Mhm.
others. And this includes, unfortunately, family. You know, I am extremely pro family, extremely. I would love it if we lived in a world where all siblings got along and all parents and children got along and all cousins. I would love that world, but that's just not the world we live in. So,
Yes.
you know, so many times, and I know this is a tough subject because we just celebrated Mother's Day, But if your mother is abusive or toxic, or she blurs lines all the time, she doesn't respect your boundaries, you have the right, not only the right, the obligation to love her from a distance,
Yeah.
or anybody for that matter. Keep in mind, blood may be thicker than water, but water doesn't stain.
Right. Good point. And that's so true. You know, many times we stay in those kinds of relationships because we think we should. We've been told we should, you know, and they're not good for any of us.
No, no. And it's our responsibility to guard our mind, body, and soul, you know. And I just, you know, just to make sure anybody listening, I'm not saying cut ties with any family members. I'm just saying oftentimes you have to modify your
Sure.
relationship with them. So
Yeah.
whatever that means for, you know, for the listener.
Yeah.
You don't have to, you know, necessarily cut them out of your life, but sometimes you have to modify and put up some boundaries.
Absolutely. And then, you know, as parents, you also think about, well, how is this relationship going to impact my kids, you know, and
100%.
generations beyond them, because it does impact, right? We're all influenced by that long line of ancestors behind us.
Yeah.
And if we're not the ones at this fulcrum of time to make the healthy changes, then we're just perpetuating whatever happened.
Yeah. And, you know, speaking from a parent's perspective, and I do have children, uh, your number one obligation as a parent is to keep your child safe.
Yeah.
And so if that means that you need to teach them correct boundaries, that is your job as a parent, to teach them correct boundaries, even if that means making tough decisions. And oftentimes when it comes to our extended family, those are some pretty tough decisions.
Yeah, it is. It's very true. And goes back to self-knowledge, you know, strength in who I am. If I'm not clear on who I am, then I'm going to have a really hard time doing that.
Yeah. 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 And in, like I said, in this day and age with social media, everybody wants to keep up with the Joneses, or, you know, I want my eyebrows like Kim Kardashian or whatever. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I've heard, you know, or what have you. And 9 times out of 10, they're, you know, emulating somebody else.
Yeah.
So, you know, unfortunately, I think, especially, you know, I'm glad we're getting out of COVID, but COVID that kept everybody home for so long, we became so isolated that social media has really been such a go-to. The last study that I read, the average teen spends 9 hours a day on social media. That's
Oh,
more than a third of your day
wow.
on social media, disconnecting from those around you. And the problem with a lot of teens, and I don't want to offend anybody, I don't want to paint a broad brush. Adults can look at social media and say, yeah, that's not how you eat dinner every day. Spare me. Or yeah, that's not how clean your house is every day. Spare me.
Yeah.
But a teen, they look at things and all of a sudden it goes directly to the heart of who they are. Oh my God, I got to get this product to get rid of my zits so I can meet the
Right.
person of my dreams, or I got to lose this amount of weight, or I got to do that. It's like that goes right to them, and they personalize things. I mean, even adults can personalize things, don't get me wrong, but there's just a little bit more of, you know, perspective and maturity and context there. So I think social media, it is wonderful if you let it work for you, but if not, it'll definitely work the teen. And this
Yeah.
is why, in my opinion, depression, one of the big reasons depression has skyrocketed during COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly we see those statistics played out in recent reports, you know, about um, sadly, drug abuse, drug overdoses, deaths,
Absolutely.
suicide.
Suicides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so sad. So as I was introducing you and reading your bio, wow, what an amazing story you have personally.
Well, you know something? I'll tell you what, some of the best wisdom is born from pain.
Yeah.
So I don't like the disruptions of my life, but I love the destination.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's true for a lot of us who've experienced traumas in various ways. And when we glean the wisdom and the learnings from it, it's such a powerful force in our lives.
If you do the work and heal from it,
Yeah.
because you know, as a trauma practitioner, there are people I talk to that, Sally, are 20 and 30 years
Oh,
out of
yeah,
their abuse, out of their dysfunction, out of their trauma, out of their betrayal, and they're still holding on to it like it
yeah,
was yesterday.
yeah,
So if you, if you do the work, certainly those tears can transform.
yeah,
That pain can certainly become your passion. But it's like a kink in your body. If you don't need that kink out and get rid of it,
mhm,
it's just going to come out in other areas. So,
yeah,
I mean, if you do the work, absolutely, you can go from, grief to growth.
yeah. And that is key. You have to do the work. You can't just wait for time to pass, because clearly time doesn't heal, right? It's how we use that time that either heals or doesn't heal. And I work with people on trauma as well, with trauma aware modalities. And I think there are a lot of coaches out there who don't have that awareness that you have, that I have, and they can do a lot of harm for people, because if you miss how trauma presents, then there may be a tendency for the coach to blame the client.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's treatment. I have a couple clients right now that came to me because of treatment trauma.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that, yeah, I just want to say this too. Hopefully I'm not digressing. I want to say, as a spiritual man, I am very, very pro whatever spirituality anybody goes into. But I also warn people, be very careful going to your religious leaders with trauma, because without question, they're well intended. But if you go see somebody who's not trauma informed, it can do you a lot more harm than
Yeah.
good. So absolutely, without question. Listen, do I respect every pastor, preacher, father out there? 100%. Do I respect every, well, not the ones that blur lines and things like that. I don't, but don't get me wrong. But do I respect counselors and therapists and psychologists? Absolutely. But if you have trauma, you got to go to somebody who's trauma informed.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's very different. It presents differently. People respond, react differently to certain.
Even on a fundamental level, like, if you're talking to, let's just say I'm talking to, somebody who had a miscarriage, right?
Mhm.
I can nod my head, and I can understand and sympathize and maybe shed a tear or two and, all this other stuff. But if that person's talking to somebody else who had a miscarriage, that conversation's on a completely different energy level.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say that somebody should have endured trauma to be a good coach or practitioner. I will never say that. But
Right.
I will say there's no substitute for experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, it, and I think it's important to understand that when people still have unresolved trauma, they're really not able to look forward. They're trapped in the past, and everything is seen through the rear view mirror, right? And so, we wonder why, oh, you're not able to be successful in your business or your career or your relationship or whatever. It affects in so many different ways, right? And that's why, because how can you have forward-looking goals when you're constantly living backward?
Yeah. I was just actually given a class, and I titled the class, "Do You Drive Looking in Your Rearview Window?" And the purpose of our rear view mirror is to A, see what we passed, what's behind us, B,
Yeah.
make sure what's behind us is not going to catch up and hit into us or whatever. So what's in front of us is far more important than what's behind us. Not to mention the windshield is 100 times bigger for a reason than your rear view mirror. But understandably, we all get into what's called trauma drive, and it's what drives us is our trauma. I mean, this, like, after trauma, people now live their life in a constant state of hypervigilance.
Yes.
You look at things differently, you question things differently. And I'm not saying all that is bad, but you do have to learn how to tame and temper it. Because if you don't get a grasp and know how to use the tools and tips and techniques to be on top of it, your trauma will be on top of you and you as you. So you got to be proactive. It does take a lot of work. And I'll repeat what I said before. Trauma work is not easy. It's not fun, but sometimes you got to get uncomfortable so you can live comfortably.
Yes, that's so true. I think there's a lot in mainstream society that tells us not to do that. I recall my first husband passed away 18 years ago this year, and in the aftermath of that, people were all so well-meaning, they thought, and yet they said some very hurtful things, like, oh, you're still sad? Well, yeah, it's 2 weeks later and I'm still sad. Yeah, sorry. Or, oh, wow, you're so lucky your husband died. My husband left me. At least your husband's never coming back. And I'm like, how is that helpful? And so people are giving comfort, they think, but they're comforting out of their own trauma. And so it's not helpful.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to try to meet people where they are and just look at their intention. People say the most ridiculous things, but if you can tell yourself they didn't have bad intention, that helps a lot. I mean, Marie Osmond, I don't know if you're familiar with Marie Osmond. She was a part of okay. When she lost, I think it was her 7th or 8th child. She has like 7 or 8 children. One of them she lost to suicide.
I recall,
And one of the things she said was, people would come up to her and say, well, at least you have 6 other kids. And she said, I understand that was their way of trying to get me to focus on something positive, but that wasn't really helpful. So that, that's the thing is you have to look at sometimes people's intentions rather than their behavior.
Yeah, I know. And yet it's hard, right?
Of course it is. Yeah. I mean, which is why I say you can't control or change anyone outside you. You can only, control and change inside. So, I just lost a dad a few months ago. And when people came to the funeral, a lot of them had some tremendous wise wisdom, and other people were like, well, you had him for, a good 40 years. So it's like, okay, so you have to, again, say, okay, I understand what your intention is, and it's all, and sometimes people just don't know what to say, and I understand that.
It's a very awkward time, and you're right. We don't know what to say. We don't feel comfortable with it, so we're not comfortable saying anything. And sometimes all you want is somebody to just go, "Yeah, this really sucks."
And then other times you don't want somebody to say anything at all.
Yeah,
you just want them to hold your hand, look at you in the eye, and let their soul say, "I get it," or "I'm sorry."
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Just sit there in the darkness with you.
Yeah. Some of the best conversations sometimes are had in silence.
Yeah. True. Very true. So a couple more questions. The first question is, so in my coaching, I use an acronym, MSG. It stands for Mindset, Skill Set, Get Off Your Asset. And it encapsulates a lot of very important principles. As you look at your life and your career, is there an overarching principle that you would point to that you believe has contributed to your success?
Well, I'm going to tell you something, Sally. Like I was saying before, there's no substitute for experience. And I think if you look at a lot of studies, sometimes studies take 5, 10, 20 years. Mm-hmm. And then out of that study comes a good result. And we don't learn from the study. We learn from the results of the study.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to take all of the suffering, all of the lessons of the suffering that I gave myself, and help prevent other people from giving themselves the same suffering they give themselves after the pain that others gave them.
Yeah.
Because people give us pain, but we give ourselves suffering.
Yes.
And if I can help somebody prevent themselves from that long, unnecessary journey of suffering, that's what I want to use. And I think that's why I'm relatively successful, because I can't tell you how many times I'm talking to a client and they'll say, Coach Jay, man, I really feel like you get me. And if nothing else, listen, I got degrees up the yang. I can spout out with all my degrees. Who gives a crap?
Yeah.
Can you relate to somebody? Sometimes that's all people need is, do I feel heard in your presence? Do I feel valued and validated in your presence? Sometimes that's just enough to jumpstart the necessary healing that they need.
I love that. And I really love how you differentiated between pain and suffering. And it reminded me of Jane McGonigal, her book, Super Better. And there's a line, again, I'm not going to say it exactly right, but she said, I was still in pain, but I was no longer suffering. And I think that's a worthy goal for us, right?
Absolutely.
To help people get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And we got to be careful. I know we're ending, but we got to be careful because I always say, Sally, we narrate and then we ruminate and then we marinate.
Yeah.
So we narrate some negative self-dialogue, and then after a while, we just ruminate on that. Then after we ruminate on a while, then we start getting comfortable, complacent, and we marinate in that thing. Once we marinate, we're changing the neural pathways in our mind, and that's going to take so much longer to heal and undo. So that's what I want to do, is stop the narration and its tracks before it gets to anything else.
Interrupt it at that point, and then you can change everything.
Yes.
Fabulous insight. So how can people get in touch with you?
Easy website, mrjrelationshipcoach.com. Simple as that. But I say that, listen, even if people never want to talk to me for whatever reason, wonderful. Please just come and look at the many free resources that I have on my website. I have articles. I have a YouTube channel where every single day I upload a tip or a technique on trauma or dating or whatever. I call them my daily doses of vitamin J. So even if you don't come to my website, one more time, shameless plug, mrjrelationshipcoach.com. If nothing else, just take advantage of my many free resources.
I love that. So everybody, make sure you check the show notes. That will be there with a link to get to the website, and absolutely take advantage of all of those fabulous free resources that are being offered.
Thank you, Sally. Again, I appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Make sure you tune in next time for High Frequency Mindset Podcast.